Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 8 of The Midnight Club. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So kind of in a similar vein of kind of episode, 6 and 7, I want to say. How you kind of just start with like a story. Like, I'm not saying the episode was structured like this, but I'm going to structure my discussion about it because I think this might be, and it's weird to say this. I'm going to preface that by saying like it was probably one of my favorite stories because it was just so, I think it resonated a lot with me. Because now it makes me realize, like, when you go back, I mean, and we've gotten it little by little, because once again, it's that element of you speak, those stories are birthed from your truth. And I knew that to some extent, but I feel like this episode really made that so apparently clear. Previous episodes have too, because like once again, like learning more about Anya, you go like, oh my god, I see so many elements in the Dana story that see so much about her. So it's like, right, we see this like real like you pull from your own story and you change stuff around, but it's like, yeah, like they're at its core, those stories apply to certain aspects about yourself, which we'll get to later. But the Natsuki thing, that was actually a heartbreaking story. And at first, when that story when it first started, it's like, okay, you're picking up these strangers. What's going on here? It's Freedom Jack and Poppy Corn. Now, I immediately was like, the way they're talking back and forth to each other, like, oh, you should stop for that person. No, you shouldn't. Oh, we should stop for gas. No, we don't have to stop for gas. I was like, oh, it's like a devil and angel on your shoulder type of thing, which I think is still applicable even by the end, but there's even more nuance to it as we go on. But I didn't figure out what that story was until after the second gas station. I was like, oh, it's foggier. And he's telling her like constantly like, oh, like keep it running. Don't turn off the gas. She's saying like, get out the car, get some fresh air. It's not until like the back and forth and she started coughing and she's like, oh, cough, cough. And then like, she's like, what's that smell? I was like, oh my God, she's still in the garage. I was like, this is a giant metaphor that she's dying from carbon monoxide poisoning because she never left the garage. She's in there dying right now. And this is just like her brain I didn't quite get it at first of it being her brain at war with itself. But more so like maybe this is like an angel and the devil like reaching out to you like hey, like you need to kind of step away is what, Poppycorn being kind of like the angel and Freedom Jack being like the devil. And I think that's such an interesting thing too, because like Freedom Jack is like, no, kind of let go. Like, oh, like I love the nighttime drive and stuff like that. Because he went like on that sociopath to think of like, oh yeah, like I might have killed the attendant and something like that. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, because she wanted to stop for gas. Because even that was the thing too. Like when she noticed the gas, she was like, wait, I had half a tank before. Why isn't, all of a sudden I'm at a quarter tank. It was like little by little they were like, but like I said, it wasn't until after the second gas station and then that conversation, that back and forth between Poppy and Freedom Jack and Poppy Corn that I realized like what was going on. I was like, that's so powerful being like what this is all about. And so, because also when she like went by because it's like, oh, because they passed by the stranger the second time, but because at first I was like, wait, that's Natsuki that they passed by. I was like, because at first I was like, okay, is this like some guy, like the road to nowhere? It's like, is this like a lost road of like, like she's going to end up on an accident? It's kind of like a ghost story of like, oh, she's seeing herself because she's already died and she's kind of reliving this, and that's her like walking this pathway, but it's like, that's who she's going to be because she's going to die on this road type of situation, which I mean, that still could be applicable in certain regards, but that's where I thought that was heading. Once again, like the devil and angel on your shoulder type of situation. But once again, there was that element from Poppy Corn being like, you don't have to do what he says. Just turn off the car and get out. Because every time he would like butt him, like, I don't know, I'm here. You don't have to stop the car. Let's go. There's no one here at the gas station. That like Poppy would just kind of look annoyed, like, I was so close to getting you, like, going down there. Like, it's almost, once again, it's like a battle for her soul, essentially. But as it goes on, she's trying to figure out like, wait, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. And then when they meet the little girl in the middle of the road, she's like, oh, she looks familiar. I'm like, it's Teresa, her character. And Poppy's like, no, I'll go with you. Cause he's like, no, they're trying to bait you. Don't get out the car. But she goes after the little girl. They end up at a gas station. Cause I didn't realize it when they went to the second gas station. Well, cause I noticed that the signs had changed. I was like, oh, that's a nice little detail. But I didn't get, once again, that was before I realized what this was all about. And now in retrospect, I'm like, oh, the sign change means a lot because it's representative of like a calendar in the garage. And then what happens when they go to the third gas station together looking for the little girl. And it's like, and what does Poppy Corn say? She's like, she's in the garage. I was like, yes. And I didn't even notice it. The lights around it were the Christmas lights from the garage. I was like, and what are they doing? They're flicking on and off. And when Teresa gets back, she realizes like, oh my, the lights are off. The tennis balls too, like at first it was like something hit the window. I was like, what is that? I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I was like, what was that? She's like, it was something green. And then later on it happens again. And I was like, right. She has a tennis ball hanging from her mirror in the car. I was like, oh my God. And like a whole bunch of tennis balls started hitting because like it moves so fast you can't really tell. But I was like hearing the thud, seeing it, like, right, little green something. I was like, it's a tennis ball. And then finding out the truth of, yeah, she's dying from carbon monoxide poisoning. She opens up the garage and finds herself. She's like, wait, what's this all about? And I was like, oh, and then like she turns and sees Poppy and Freedom Jack change. And it's like, oh, like, you know, because what did he say? He kept saying, it's going to hurt. He's basically like, let go. It's okay just to die. Life is hard. And she's like, yes, it would be easy to let go because life is hard and it is going to continue being hard. But like, the fact of the matter is you're still needed there. And it's like, who are you to? And it's like, we are you. And the beautiful metaphor of the dual sides of her brain of like, right, there's a side of herself saying, no, kill yourself. Life is tough. It's hard. And then the other side of her being like, no, you have to keep on. I know it's hard, but you have to keep fighting. You know, those two dualities inside of her head being represented like this. And I just thought it was this beautiful metaphor and story that isn't just a story. I mean, obviously she told it in this metaphorical sense, but it is Natsuki's truth. And I know YouTube like sometimes can get funny about this word, but like suicide, like this being a suicide story really hit me because I think it really like, cause I think really, truth be told, if I think back to a lot of the stories, they're all really good stories and what they represent, I think you could always pull something from them. But this story in particular, because I am someone who struggled with those thoughts. The fact is, you know, like those, like sometimes, you know, those conversations of like, I feel like sometimes I would be better off just going and then like that door with yourself being like, no, you know, there's a conversation about that line where people will say, you know, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And obviously that's an even more complicated, that statement I feel like is harder to kind of like stick with sometimes too, because especially when you touch on the fact is they introduced the fact is Natsuki has clinical depression. And you know, and I'm like, they were laying the groundwork for this powerful story in that regard. And so for it to be a situation of, her deciding like, no, she wants to live. So she opens the door, wakes up, and she crawls and opens the garage. And it's like, yeah, she lived. But then she tells Amish like, oh no, like the story actually didn't go that way. Like it makes it a nicer, more powerful ending. But like truth be told is I only got out the car. My mom came home, breathed life back into me, like on the way to the ambulance taking me to the hospital. And I lived just for me to find out, oh, I'm dying, because they found, while they were resuscitating me, making sure I'm okay, they found something else. She's like, I thought I wanted to die. And when I decide I realized like, oh no, I wanted to live. Now I'm finding out, no, I'm actually dying, and slowly. That to her, she's like, that fucked me up. Struggling with this complicated notion of like one side of your brain is like, oh, just want you to kill yourself, and like at war with the other side of your brain telling you to live. And now it's like when you go realize like, oh, I thought I wanted to die, but I don't. But now that I don't want to die, I find out I'm sick and I'm dying anyway. It's like, that is the most fucked up thing ever. And that's just, and she said, like she said, it fucked her up. It's like, how do you like come to terms with that. And she says, I think it's sad, it's aggravating, it can make you so angry. So I think that's what she's been struggling with this entire time. And I think it's so powerful that she was going to tell this story at Midnight Club, but, it got canceled. But she made sure to tell Amesh because they had their circumstances early on. He wanted to spend time with her because I think he's kind of scared about his time running out because he went he went allowed to get the vitamins from Mark, and he ended up kind of like stumbling a little bit, but he was like, oh no, it's part of my physical comedy routine. That's only because he's like, right, you tell me if because we'd have to kind of adjust things, like if your conditioning is getting worse, we have to kind of account for that. But Mesh is like, no, it's fine. I'm just part of my comedy routine, but it's not. His condition's getting worse and new symptoms are arising. And so he wanted to kind of spend time with Natsuki, but Natsuki was, dealing with what she was dealing with, and she kind of wanted to be alone, and she kind of pushed him away. But for her, it's like, I only pushed you away because I think there's a fear of, I want you to know me, really know me, And that's such a complicated, thing. And I even love that they made it so Amesh is like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, I think that's so beautiful and so true of there is no perfect thing to say in that moment. I don't think there is. Maybe someone could be like, no, this is what you, I don't think you can find the words in a moment like that. When hearing such a heavy truth, hearing someone's story like that, because now it also plays into what Natsuki was saying, right, my mom thought, my depression, she was like, right, that I was kind of seeking attention, or maybe it's because of my dad, but it's like, no, it runs even deeper. They're just chemical imbalance. I think it's just kind of where on a chemical level, from a scientific perspective, I think that's kind of what depression is. It's like a chemical imbalance in your brain. Do not quote me. I am not a scientist. That's always been my understanding of it. But you could easily be like, Michael, you're wrong and you're an idiot. I acknowledge that. That's just always been my understanding of kind of what depression is. It's like a chemical imbalance, which I think it's interesting considering another part of this episode talks about kind of the imbalances in the body. So I just, we'll circle to that. But I had to talk about it because I was like I said, it resonated with me because death in general sucks, I'm not going to pretend I'm afraid of death. Death to me, and I'm scared of the people I love and I care about dying. But suicide has always been that thing that has always hit harder. When it comes to death, to me, that's the most heartbreaking one. That someone just, for whatever reason, felt that need to like I said, and that's that complicated thing for me because it is something I struggle with. I've never acted upon it, but I've had those thoughts more times than I could count, And that struggle is so, I don't know, that struggle I resonated with because I've had those thoughts myself. Like I said, it's just, I don't know, and because there have been situations where celebrities have committed suicide, and it messes with me because obviously it's, it's a public figure, and that's what kind of puts it on even more so out there. I will give you a prime example. When Robin Williams killed himself, there's other circumstances to his situation. I was not in a good place at the time anyway, but hearing that story too, really sunk me even lower. I was in a really bad place at that time. And, I don't really talk to anyone about that. I don't know if I've ever even publicly ever admitted that, but around that, because I was 2014, I was at a really, really, really bad place at that time. And then that just because the whole notion of suicide, that just, it put me in a very, very dark, even darker place than I kind of was. And it's one of the few times in life I can be yeah, I was low. I don't think I've ever I've had my low moments. I don't think I've ever really been that low before, so it's just, just you taking my own, element into it. Not trying to make it about me, but just saying I think that's why there's so much about this story that really resonated with me. And like I said, that the fact is that she told, I think it makes it even more important that it was just between her and Amesh. I think it being a story that she told him, being I wanted to tell you this because I want you to know me. I think that just made that whole element in today's beautiful in its own right. So that's just that was that aspect of things. Before we get to Alanka's side of things, kind of what she ended up going down this episode, let's talk about the Sherry and Spence of it all, because I didn't talk about this in episode 6, but Sherry did open up that like, oh, like she is gay, that she liked a girl, she was in love with a girl, and it's like, right, they had these little paper like footballs like that they would kind of toss back and forth, and she kept every one of them, and that ended up being like her thing that she sacrificed to help Anya. Well, her and Spence kind of get into it because he's like, right, how could I ever tell when you're telling the truth or lying? And I think it's so interesting that she's like, well, if you can't tell, you haven't been paying close enough attention. Because I think for her, it's like, well, yeah, I do it out of instinct and it's just my thing. But at the end of the day, if you pay close enough attention, she's like, you'll probably, I mean, maybe like Mark has gotten to the point he's able to notice when she's telling lies. But it's like, oh, did you tell your parents? And she was like, yeah, I told my parents. And he was like, wow, that's really brave of you. She's like, not really. She's like, my parents are so busy. Like, she's like, I could tell them I'm addicted to heroin and they most likely wouldn't hear me. She's like, that's probably why, like, it's not, she's like, for her, it wasn't really brave. I told my parents, sure, but I didn't have anyone who cared enough to really listen. Your parents actually cared enough to listen. So for you to tell them who you are, she's like, that's brave, you know? And he feels like there's so much he wants to tell his mom, especially after everything with Anya. Because that's why what got Natsuki talking about her circumstances. Like, Anya's death has really impacted all of them and made them go like, right, we need to say what we need to say to the people that matter. And so they got Mark to drive Spitz home, and he talks to his mom. And in this beautiful speech of, yes, I am me. Like, the fact is, she's like, I had a friend who died. And the fact of the matter is, she didn't die alone. She died surrounded by us because she had no family. She had us, and we were enough. And him saying that, I hope, you know, even if you don't love me, mom, even if you reject me, and he's like, I will always love you for you. I love you for you. I just wish you could do the same. But even if you don't, it's fine, you know, because I will die, and I'm dying and I will die. That's just a matter of fact of my circumstances. But I would love dying like with you in my life. That I would want you to be a part of my life, mom. But if you're not, it's okay, because my friends, I know they love me and they care about me. They will be enough, even if I don't have you. So I love you, mom. And saying what he needed to say. And his mom couldn't really even say anything. And I think his dad couldn't either. It's like, right. And, you know, it's like, oh, the entire ride back, Spence didn't say anything. But it's like, and Sherry says, like, would you do it again? And he was like, yeah, I would. And she's like, that's how you know you did the right thing. So Spence is like, right, I'm going to go off and pretend like I'm in an alternate reality where everyone's gay and we're doing gay shit, and then I'm gonna start dancing or something like that. And I thought that was a beautiful side of things, and I like that Sherry was able to kind of, because I think it is important, especially because we know that Mark is openly gay, and Sherry being able to admit that too, and because I think that was probably the first instance of any, because like for Spence, he probably felt like amongst his friends, he's like, right, no one really knows what I'm going through because like no one else here is gay, but like no one like, wait, Sherry, you are too. So having two people in your corner like that, but also knowing that you've got the rest of everyone. Anya's gone, but she loved and respected. And like I said, that line before of, hey, if anyone messes with you, I got your back. And he was like, yeah, no one ever messed with me because of Anya. So I just thought that was a beautiful part of the episode. So, but going to the Ilanka stuff, she kind of wakes up in the bathroom. I would have thought someone would have found her, but like, right, she doesn't have a roommate at this time. So of course, like, no one would be actively going out of their way to check on her. And I guess like she woke up before anyone really had an opportunity to check up on her. So ultimately, she goes and sees Stanton, and she confronts Stanton about like, oh, I heard what you said. One of us is cured. And it's like, is it me? And she was like, no, you can't tell anyone the truth. Cause she's like, you remember what it was like when you were told, when you were diagnosed, and that rush that hits you because of just like all this hitting you all at once. It's like, you'll be doing that same thing because you don't want to get anyone's hopes up before we find out the answer. Because if you do that, it's just going to break anyone's heart before we can verify it. So she has to keep quiet about it. But then for her, she gets pissed at Stanton later on when Stanton's like, right, I haven't made a decision about the library midnight club situation. At the end of the day, I want honesty from all of you. And Ilanka's like, what? She's on basically like, honesty? Really? You fucking hypocrite? And he's like, yes. So Ilanka is keeping it to herself until Kevin. She does tell Kevin, and even Kevin's like, right, maybe it was a glitch and an issue, like a mistake in like the blood samples and stuff. But she's like, Stanton doesn't think so. I saw it in her eyes. So until now, they're just going to keep that between them. So she ended up going to see Shasta. And this is where I was bringing up earlier about the conversation of the equal parts in the body. It's like, what was it? The body is, God, it's blood, something else, yellow bile and black bile. And she was saying like, right, it was like an ancient Greek belief, maybe just ancient belief in general, but I think specifically ancient Greek belief that if you could keep those four elements of the body in equilibrium, then you'd be disease free. Even the belief that too much black bile is why you get cancer. So she starts talking about how the Stanton lives in the Bright Cliff is on a very important ley line type of place. There's something special about it, but you know, she tried to build this community and everything super, super close to it, as close as possible. And to me, this is where Shasta really, because before you kind of got like, all right, there seems like there could be some off with her. This in particular, when she's really pushing Alanka, saying like, hey, I mean, if you wanted to, don't have to, but if you wanted to, it'd be nice if I could see that book, you know. It's like, it almost feels like now your true motives are coming out. It feels like you were getting close to Alanka just for this purpose, because you knew from the very beginning, you sensed there was something special about her. Because she, like, yes, they've all had their encounters, but Alanka's the one that's had the most continuous interaction with everything going on in Bright Cliff. I mean, it happened before she even got to Bright Cliff, was kind of like the vision she was having. So she is special, and it is correlating and connecting with this place in some shape or form. What exactly, who knows? I mean, I think just like it resonated with Julia, maybe the same thing with Athena and her mom. Like, I mean, the place sent like Athena's mom down a certain route. So, and I think maybe to some extent you could look at Alanka as like the Athena or the Julia, whereas I think Kevin might end up being the mom of it all. We'll get to that, or maybe even Shasta might end up being that, but because she's saying like, right, if we work together, you know, because she's inviting her, it's like, hey, this place here could be your home, kind of like you can kind of like connect with like the natural world and stuff. And it's like, we don't really just invite anyone. She turns and looked, and everyone's looking at her. I was like, that's not creepy as shit. Because once again, I'm like, yeah, the more time like Alanka's there, the more time I'm feeling like, yeah, you might not be Paragon necessarily, but you definitely feel super cultish in those moments like that. So, but it's like, yeah, Stanton has the book, and Chelsea's like, yeah, maybe we have something we can do about that. It's like, well, wouldn't be the first time that, Alanka's stolen from Stanton's office, but we know that Stanton burned that book. So if it magically pops up, and she'll be like, wait, what? I burned that. How was it? You know, it might be one of those things of you could try to destroy that book, but it's so intertwined with everything that it's impossible to properly destroy it type of situation. We'll have to wait and see. Because I'm assuming that was like Athena's book, journal, and stuff like that, not Julia's, the one with the Midnight Cloud. I think it had to be Athena's one, but because I think Athena's one is the one that has the hourglass and everything on it. I'm pretty sure that's the one that Stanton burned. Which, speaking of Stanton, she got in contact with whoever it was who clarified it is one of the girls, and they are definitely in a better position. So that leaves 4 on the board. Ilanka, Cherie, Sandra, and Natsuki. And Lanka was kind of wondering, like, on some level it was her, and even Shasta was like, no, it feels like it could be you. So I'd even said, like, it seems like, but I feel like the show would kind of go against that, because it is right, she kind of has, like, that main protagonist plot armor, so you'd almost be like, oh, she seems like such the obvious choice that you think, well, it'd have to be someone else, just for, like, to subvert expectations, you know, type of thing. So I don't know if it actually is Alanka, because their theory is that when they tried to heal Anya, they healed someone else. It didn't go to Anya like they wanted to. It went to someone else. It being Alanka would be interesting, because even she would have to be like, the complicated thing is like living with that, knowing like, okay, I'm living and I'm okay. Once again, the parallels to like Anya's story being the only one that survived, you know, that's kind of an interesting thing that could still happen, and it could be Alanka or whoever it is. I'm assuming Alanka, but we'll see whether that ends up being the case or not. But I feel like Alanka could easily be the only one that survives, and maybe this has to correlate with Kevin, because she later on hears the old lady that she's been running into, and she ends up going to the basement and finding Kevin. Well, because at first she turns the old lady around and it's Kevin, and it's like, wait, and he's like, oh, not again. So I think this is going to play into his Dusty story, that I think Kevin blacks out. I think he goes into a trance sometime. So I think it is a thing of maybe there is like almost maybe a little bit of a trance like personality that comes out, or maybe he sleepwalks. Like I said, he just enters a trance or something like that. So but the fact is of how things work with Dusty, and like there's these voices, and once again he specifically was like, I hope the voices leave you alone. So that might kind of be kind of hinting that maybe those are like Kevin's circumstances. We'll have to wait till the next episode to find out. But I'm almost wondering if the old lady that Ilonka keeps seeing, is that supposed to almost be representative of like his mom, who will like whisper in his ears and tells him his next victim and stuff. I'm wondering, is there kind of a correlation there? I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see, find out whether or not also, whether every time Ilonka saw the old lady, she was actually seeing Kevin or something. Like, maybe it's just like Kevin's circumstances have manifested itself that way for Ilonka. Because also Kevin was the first one amongst the group. She saw like the whole like at nighttime him sitting at the bench that she met him at in the first episode when she first arrived. Like it definitely, there's always been something there. Because I think there's also, it kind of also plays into like the connection that they have. So it's definitely going to be really, really interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.